I think it's quite a story from when we started in 1971. And I'm glad to be able to participate in those early years and kind of lay the groundwork for where we started and some of the things we accomplished and some of the things we didn't. Well, I was with the city of Boulder as a patrol officer, having come from Adams County in 1967 and then back to Boulder County working with Rex Scott as his criminal investigator. And in that role, I was able to work with the existing sheriff's office. Marv Nelson was a sheriff, and he had a couple of guys in investigations and then a few patrol people. What was happening in law enforcement were in the 60s and early 70s was the Supreme Court. Mapp versus Ohio, Galt, all of those cases were landmark cases that changed law enforcement's methods of operation. They just had to completely start over. And we knew that, and we knew that in the late 60s, and the existing sheriff's office was not able to do that. Some guys I had known when I was with Rex Scott's office asked me to run for sheriff. I made the decision, talked to my wife, made the decision to run, and it was on the last day they could file. And I was happy as I could be being a city police officer. I knew the history of the office from having worked with them on major case development when I was with the DA's office, and I knew it had to be changed.
Brad Leach, when he was elected, one of his campaign promises was to take the Sheriff's Office Patrol Division to a 24/7 operation, and it had not been part of that.
Brad's goal was to somehow make this a quasi-professional agency. One of his things was, we need equipment, we need manpower, we need stability in our sheriff's office environment.
As Brad continued in his 20 years of being sheriff, the office evolved in areas of policy and procedure, due process for employees, how internal investigations were conducted. All of that began to grow and become more sophisticated as we brought in more people with different levels of experience.
We're hiring at Boulder. I says, Boulder? What do you mean Boulder? I heard all kinds of things about Boulder. Well, we've got a new sheriff in town, Brad Leach.
I started when I was 22 years old. I did an interview like on a Thursday and was hired on a Sunday for an academy that started on a Monday.
Basically, we were just flying by the seat of our pants initially, and when we say that, I mean because we didn't have equipment that we knew we had to have. Vehicles, among other things, radios, comms for both dispatch and telephone answering, as well as training was a big thing for me. There was no training before. We realized early on, we being staff, that we needed to run an academy. Finally, we were the third post-certified training academy in the state of Colorado.
I felt like the standards were set really high for all of us, higher than maybe other organizations, and I never wanted to fail to meet those standards. I think we all aspired to be as good as we could be in our jobs.
But he wanted his people to be safe. He wanted us all to have the resources we needed, and he was gonna be behind us no matter what.
Here's what I'm proud of. We really were able to influence how this department got developed.
We started over from ground zero. There were no case records. There were no case files. We had no files of old homicides.
The undersheriff says, look, before you go out on the street, I need you to fix the evidence procedure in the county, in the sheriff's department. I says, okay, how do you do it now? He took me to it, opened up a closet. There's just stuff piled in there. They were tagged, but you had to go look through all of it to figure out which one you wanted.
My first years at the department, I was in jail for 3 years. We had quite the crew. We went from 2 men and a woman on graveyard shift in the jail to usually 4 men and usually 2 women and as matrons in the jail.
First case review I had, and that was one thing that they instigated, was a case review for all detectives for all cases. My very first case review, I'd been there a month. I had 112 cases. But at that time, Brad said, you will contact everyone who has contacted us with any kind of a complaint or a case or whatever. You contact them personally. So you would sit there on the phone calling everybody.
It was that kind of oversight that I think created a culture of this idea that we needed to be on top of our investigations, doing things in a timely manner, and being very thorough. The second thing that people hated but was very effective was a swing shift detective team. And so you had detectives that worked days, and then other detectives that came on at, I think, 2 o'clock or something in that area to 10, and worked a swing shift Monday through Friday.
There was a formality also that Brad brought in. We had the Stetson hats.
Stetson.
Those were, there was an image that was portrayed back then that isn't with the baseball caps today.
The only thing that they didn't like were the hats. I remember that. The hats were, they were one of my attempts to identify us as a different agency, that they don't work in the wind.
We had briefings every shift. What they would do is they would check your weapon, make sure your revolver had bullets in it. And to be honest with you, there were some people that didn't have bullets in theirs. And we also had to produce a dime. You know what the dime was for? To call.
Emergency phone call.
One thing that Brad always said is, if you did it, just tell me you did it, and we'll deal with it. If you lie about it, you're fired. And I saw them fire people.
Yep.
I mean, I could count a number of people who got fired for lying, not for the act, but for lying.
Sheriff Guy Van Cleve, who was my mentor and whom I just really thought the world of. Also, not too many people know this, but Guy Van Cleve, who was sheriff in Adams County, there were 4 major counties: Boulder, Adams, Arapahoe, and Jefferson. Guy was very good to me. He taught me a lot of things I needed to know later or didn't realize at the time. He had a rule that you can make a mistake and it can be forgiven and we'll correct it, but don't ever lie to me, or don't ever falsify a report, don't ever make something up in an affidavit for a search warrant, because that doesn't go. And we adopted that from day one with our group, and yeah, we had mistakes, and okay, we're not gonna do that again, are we? No, we're not gonna do that again. So we changed our ways, but we certainly did it in an honest way. We allowed innovation, for one thing. We allowed people to not be constrained by the way we've always done things. If you had a good idea, let's try it, kind of an attitude.
And that era, which was not overnight by any means, but it was a pretty substantial era between establishing STAR, establishing females in law enforcement, establishing cooperative efforts between the agencies. That was a major accomplishment of Leach.
I always have to point out, in those early years, we really didn't have, I think the first electronic notification system we had were pagers. And there weren't any cell phones. There wasn't any GPS. There certainly wasn't any DNA.
I don't remember that we had a defined EOC. My first recollection of even a mobile command post was when we bought a used Boulder Valley School District bus and painted it blue and white,
Right.
and used the red flashing lights for our response if we had to.
COSIN was a computer-operated sheriff's information network, developed primarily by George Heinrichs and Bill McKay. He was responsible for joining the communications for the entire county, both fire, medical, and most of the law enforcement. And it literally gave agencies the ability to, using common frequencies, to to know what was going on. Ought to be talking about the special teams that we created. Early on, we created a canine unit. The officers would train the dogs and work with them, and they would be their dogs, and they'd take them home, and then they'd bring them to work. Star team, but really it was a special response team, and for unique situations. And these were senior guys who could do it. Some of them were military, who had military background training, and some, we trained our own. We were the only team like that in the county for a number of years. And we actually worked with cities and helped solve some of their more serious problems. We did have a bomb squad as well, with equipment and bomb trailers to put devices in. We also developed what we called the county shoot team for officer-involved shootings for any agency, because we asked all agencies to participate. We didn't have a civilian review board, and we didn't want questions to be answered by the host agency itself. We wanted to objectively investigate with a team of officers from different agencies working together to sort it out. What happened? Was it justifiable? Was the officer following policy? Those kind of things. And in almost every case, it was a very successful review and accepted by the community. I was able to accomplish a lot of things early on. We, the people, elect the sheriff directly. Good, bad, or indifferent. You know what you're going to get by what they said they would do, and you hold them accountable the next 4 years.
When I look back on it, I just feel so lucky that I happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right group of people, because everybody was so young and we were all learning kind of together, I think. That's how I always felt anyway.
We're able to influence how this department got developed.
100%.
How it is today. There's one thing of just working for somebody.
Right.
But if you can work for somebody and they allow you to help develop the program.
And by those years, we were able to start building some systems of investigation, solvability factors, case review, things that all agencies eventually have to do. We had no idea going in the door that's what we were going to need to do first. We didn't do it first, but you just kept working on whatever was new, and eventually we refined it.